Happy Halloween and welcome to the Signal Watch. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Once again, our cadre of co-contributors creep from the crypt for a spooktacular season of petrifying podcasts. We're reaching into our bag of tricks to line up some horrific treats in the phantasmagoric form of films that find a peculiar perspective on familiar frights. Stay terrified. We're going to try to make it work.
White on white, translucent black capes, back on the rack. Bella Lugos is dead.
Happy Halloween and welcome to a very spooky episode of the Signal Watch. I'm glad you enjoyed that because Simon's heard that so many times at this point. This Halloween, he has not laughed once when I've said
what?
Yeah, well, he's because this is like year 5 or something for us of doing Halloween episodes. So.
I feel like I need to really every year. I'm like, I really need to reach out to Ryan because I feel like I have some really solid Halloween picks, and I never do. And then it comes too late. I'm like, is Halloween booked for you? And you're like, oh, dear sir, it is overbooked. I'm like, well, shit.
Well, yeah. So just so that give everyone a peek behind the curtain, we have traditionally recorded very early, like starting in like July. And so Simon's already thinking of his movies in like May. Maybe earlier for Halloween, and he starts like rattling them off, and I'm like, whatever, and then he just tells me a week in advance, and I watch whatever insane movie he's picked. So this year we hit early August, and I was like, why are we doing this so early this year? And because when we do it, we generally, I'm not doing other podcasts, or I'm like this year I'm doing stuff with Danny during that time, and we realized it's because I used to travel for work in the summer and into the early fall. And I was really unpredictable as to when I would be around. So we would always do it like midsummer. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have a completely different job now. There's no reason. So next year we'll be doing it later. It is mid-September today, just to give you, this is going to be like the second to last episode to roll out, I think. And we're done here in mid-September. So my October will be watching Halloween movies with no podcast commentary. So I didn't say who was here with me, so you need to say who you are for legal reasons.
It's Justin Lincoln.
Welcome back, Hi. Justin. I believe
it's good to be back. It's been a while.
It has been, and I'm thrilled to have you. I think what happened was we were doing the Batman podcast. Mm-hmm. Which stars Robert Pattinson, and you said somewhere as a passing thought, and I really like Twilight, and it almost derailed the whole podcast because
I speak only the truth.
Yeah, and I was like, I've clearly not seen the light, and so I'm going to start with my experience with Twilight, and then we will. Okay. What I would like to do is in a safe space here, have you unpack Twilight for the audience. Jamie read the books and was just giggling her ass off through the entire series of books, which I believe pretty much were all released en masse.
I think that's probably. Go on.
Oh, anyway. So, yeah. And so then the movies appeared in 2008, and I watched the first one in Berkeley, California, on a TV. So it was probably 2009, and had my own bottle of red wine to imbibe during the movie. And so it was a little hazy. I didn't necessarily remember it super well. But what I remembered was I kept pausing the movie to ask the room of people who'd seen it before a series of questions, all of which shocked me in their answers. And then I watched all of the rest of the movies the same way, except for the final one, which I've never seen the second half of, because the wine had taken hold, the drink had taken hold, and we all wandered off to go do something else. And I've never seen how the Twilight saga actually ends. But that's it. That's pretty much my experience. And then getting into the 50 Shades stuff, which actually launched this whole podcast. If anyone wants to go look at like the early episodes of the Signal Watch podcast. That's it for me, man. Go for it. Yeah.
Let's see. So I had never had any interest in any of these films, and I had dismissed them, as many people my age had. And finally, I'm trying to find out exactly when did I watch this. So I watched this in 2018. July 17th, 2018 is when I watched this.
That's because you have that tattoo of Bella's face on your left breast with the date under it. That's how you know. I mean, I'm glad you can read it backwards from Zoom. It's very, really impressive. So I had heard nothing but like mockery of this movie. And so I was curious as to what this is about, because I am not a hate watcher of films. I go into it with, much like Edward, very pure of heart. So I went into it pretty open-eyed and trying not to go into it predisposed to dislike it, because that's what was like the popular thing to do. And I figure this podcast is going to go a couple of ways, and it may like really intertwine itself. So one is, it's true, I do like this movie. I think this is a good movie. I don't think all of the Twilight movies are good. Either in whenever this gets posted, or maybe later, if I can remember, I will give my Letterboxd handle. So if those who so desire, I think Stuart and I are buddies on Letterboxd. You can read what I think about the others, which is there's a drastic drop off in quality. And then I think the last two are chef's kiss perfect. Okay.
I think that they truly embrace the Harlequin romance that this really is.
I do want to say Justin's Letterboxd is also, if you go to signal-watch.com and you look in the left menu bar, I've linked to his Letterboxd there. So you should be able to see whatever he's thought about, whatever the hell he's been watching lately, and link to it and dig it up. So
You're about to get a bunch of horror movies. You're about to get a bunch of Fantastic Fest movies, which I hope I survive.
Yeah. So I think that's worth mentioning too. You're maybe, I mean, I know a lot of horror fans out there, but you're like Mr. Fantastic Fest. You dig into the like weird dark corners of the movie world. You're not someone who got into Twilight because like you had seen that in Boss Baby, and that was pretty much it for you seeing movies. Like you're a guy who knows movies.
Yeah. Like, and in Boss Babies, it's not that bad.
I've heard everyone who's seen it has told me Boss Baby's pretty good.
You're like, yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. What an odd pairing of films. Twilight and Boss Baby.
Boss Baby's on my mind because of the meme of
I don't
guy who's only seen Boss Baby watches another movie and says this movie really has Boss Baby vibes.
That's well, I like that a lot.
Which explains a lot of like 20-something film Twitter is kind of the joke. Yeah.
Let's see. Where to begin with Twilight? Like I say, I came to it because it's a real easy punching bag. And for those who know me, I will tend to stick up for the punching bag because I think that movies that get unqualified dislike probably don't deserve it, in my opinion. Some do.
This is so hard for me, but go on.
No. That's fine. I'm willing to take this in whichever direction. Yeah. I think this movie is aimed at a certain audience that's probably not you or I.
Which is why, yes, 100%. Yes, this audience, and we'll need to talk about who that audience is.
I think the audience is people who are Bella's age or people who once were Bella's age.
That's literally everybody over 16.
Well, yeah, there we go. I mean, it really hits all those quadrants, doesn't it? Thank you for joining the Signal Watch. Twilight, the greatest film ever made.
I think I understand. I think when it came out, it was my understanding of the audience was it was for people who, especially women who could tap into what it was to be. And I would argue the novels are actually for people slightly younger than Bella is supposed to be, as is usually the case of YA. And the novels were, despite the fact their phone book size, were YA books. And that, I believe, is, I don't, whatever. There's a massive, and especially after this, a massive YA market of supernatural romance and vampire high school movies and, wizard high school movies and whatever else at this point. I guess that's Harry Potter.
Wizard high school.
But yeah, I mean, it came out, the books came out kind of on the heels of the Harry Potter phenomenon, and YA is, during our adulthood, has taken on an importance that it did not have when we were coming up.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if this was, I don't know what books I would have been reading at I mean, I'm not sure what the YA books were for us other than comic books.
I don't think the genre quite existed. Yeah. Like, we were making the shift into, I mean, stuff that was considered emotionally immature but was written for all ages, like Asimov was, that was what I was reading in like middle school, and then by the time I was Bella's age, I was reading American Psycho in high school. So it was a little different picture.
Where did we start with this? I enjoyed the movie. I was expecting stupidity. I was expecting characters I didn't believe in. I was expecting a poorly made movie that was simply put out to cash in on the books. And what I got out of it was a very competently directed movie. I mean, they brought in Catherine Hardwicke, who got her indie cred from 13. So they bring in a good indie director, which I don't know if there were a lot of franchise wannabes at this point that were going that route to bring in, like, well, let's bring in somebody with credibility. I mean, Harry Potter had brought in, I feel like they brought in more prestige directors.
Yeah.
Which I think Twilight gets to prestige director with Bill Condon. I mean, Chris Weitz has credit, but his movie is terrible. And I forget who directed the third one. It's also horrible. But I expected a bad movie. And what I feel like I got out of this was a movie that was well made, well acted, which I know that people thought that the acting was bad, but I will wildly disagree with that. I mean, I think that time has proven that there's nothing but very good actors all throughout this series. And I thought it would be characters acting idiotically. And whether they act idiotically or not, I think that all of these characters act exactly how these characters should act. I mean, Bella's a goofy high school girl who acts kind of like a goofy high school girl. Edward is supposed to be a 17-year-old vampire who they say has been 17 for a very long time. And I think his acting and his character is very on par with that. And I like baseball. And this movie features a really clever baseball scene, which I think is also a lot of fun. I think this movie is smarter than it, maybe not smarter than it needed to be, but as it is as smart as it needs to be. And I think Catherine Hardwicke, who comes off of 13, I think she's a really good choice because I don't think she's interested in pointing a finger at these characters and kind of nudging to the audience like, aren't they stupid? I think she takes them seriously, even if they're acting like stupid teenagers.
I think that's an interesting point of view because this time when I watched it, I wasn't thinking. About halfway through, I did have the realization it's not that the characters might be acting stupid. And one of the things I noticed was like, there's always shit going on in the background. Like anytime there's a crowd scene or a scene where like Edward and Bella sitting at a picnic table talking, the other characters are nearby because they do that realistic, like you hang out somewhere near your friends, even if you're not talking to them specifically, you're talking to one other person. And she decided to include the business that the other people are doing in the background, which can sometimes be wildly distracting. There's a kid who seems to want to wave worms and snakes in people's faces quite a bit. But at this time that was what connected me to that idea was what a jackass. Oh, when I was 16, I too probably would have been going, worm. It's a worm.
Yeah, and I think he's an idiot, if I remember right. And it's been I really meant to have watched it before. I mean, not that I watch the movie often, but I did. I mean, I have my Thursday viewings. I did watch it because it was recent. All these were recently on Prime, and now they're gone. And so I watched it before it left, which I think was the end of last month. But I meant to have watched it again. Anyway, that kid struck me because I think he's like really interested in Bella, right? Like, doesn't he want her to take her to?
No, it's Eric, the guy who takes the girl with the glasses.
Okay,
is the guy who's obsessed with waving worms at people.
Gotcha.
The like guy it's the other guy's name is like Matt or something like that who is interested in Bella. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the criticisms, I'm going to put some of them out on the table and kind of see how you react to them, is everybody is interested in Bella. Everybody in this movie, she shows up and that Eric kid like assaults her in the parking lot of like, your news. Everyone cares about the new kid. And then you got to sit with my friends. And it's all about how they all react to Bella existing as the new thing. And then like everybody, like in every scene, everybody is, she smells so good that all the vampires care about her. And she's constantly the most interesting thing in a movie about a family of vampires. And that was one of the criticisms that kind of older readers and viewers of the film had.
I guess, but isn't she like us? Like, isn't she the surrogate? I'm not sure if I'm using that term right, but like, she's the one we identify with, right? Like,
she is, but it's also usually, and I will also say I moved a lot growing up. And I can tell you, when you're the new person at school, literally nobody gives a shit. And in fact, they're avoiding you.
But if you're the new person at the school, I guess, I'm kind of thinking about this on the fly, but I'm guessing that that's maybe how you want to be. Like, you feel like the new person and you want, like, clearly you're going to be the outsider, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe in this YA world, you want some attention, like that character wants attention put on them so they feel special. So that
the criticism has been that it reads as if what is the Mary Sue syndrome of everyone who meets this person loves this person. Everyone,
you mean like race?
What's that?
Nothing.
Oh, and everyone the main character isn't just a person who is making her way through learning about things. People continue to bring her things because of how very she has some innate quality that everyone seems to be drawn to within that is how the writer of the novel handled. And that's what got translated to the movie was she is what is most interesting to all of these people, even though there's nothing she is doing which is innately interesting other than existing.
Sure, but it's a YA novel. And I think that works perfectly in the realm of what, I mean, it's not kids, you know. It's a
vampire romance.
Yes,
high school novel.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that I think it all achieves. I think it achieves what it's trying to do. It's not trying to be realistic. I think it's a kid romance novel, and I think that I've never read those romance novels that are, I guess, aimed at like lonely housewives. I probably should, but I could learn a thing or two. But I like, this is how I see it. So when she shows up and everybody's like, "Oh, who is this?" I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because I think that's what the author is trying to convey. Because I think maybe, and clearly this doesn't speak for all people, but I do think that, I remember thinking when I moved to a new school that, okay, well, I'm new here, maybe I'll be something special. And I think what this does is say, well, you are.
Yes. Yeah. She is profoundly, I think one of the things that people look for in literature and movies is that reason someone is special.
But, okay. Are you saying that they don't give that reason here?
Aside from the fact that she's new and she smells good.
So what?
Well, I guess that's the $64,000 question, is whether that's narratively satisfying. And to you, it is. Yeah.
And if you don't think that's enough, I think everybody wants to feel special. I think and if this author gives that to them, if the author and the film validate all that, then perfectly fine.
So there's a concept that Grant Morrison has floated that people constantly fight with me about, but I always roll it out because I'm right. It's the idea of the fiction suit in Harry Potter kind of fits into it as well. that some franchise characters who are the point of view character are wildly popular, but if you take it and break it down, they're wildly bland. Harry Potter's the least interesting wizard in his series of movies. I've never read the books.
Right. Robert Pattinson is.
And I mean, everyone. I mean, the redheaded kid Ron is more interesting than Harry. Certainly, Hermione's more interesting than Harry. Every kid in that school is like a weirdo who can see the future, or whatever. Becomes amazingly handsome after the movies are done being filmed. But Harry himself is just like a dude. And the idea of that Grant Morrison put forward as far as the fiction suit, and maybe he didn't coin it, but that's where I heard it from, was they're bland enough that you can slip inside that fiction suit, even if it's a third person novel. And there's nothing so weird about that character or so different that you can't immediately identify as that POV. And I think Bella kind of fits that to a T.
Yeah.
Like, she's not the best baton twirler. She's not, the best, her voice, her singing voice is not what attracts everybody to her. She just showed up. So that's all my thoughts on that, Justin. I have no more thoughts on that.
Let's see. How about this? I will go through things that I really like about this movie.
I think that is more than fair.
And then I can talk about why I think people dislike this movie. And I don't think it's because it's a bad movie. But I wouldn't listen, if people don't like movies, fine.
I think I'm going to use that clip at the beginning of every episode.
I'll wake up in the morning just the same. Let's see. I like that Bella figures everything out. I like that she gets it, and she gets it pretty much on the nose early on. And I like that fact. I like that she doesn't get told things. I'm not a young woman. I think that's true. I think that, and this is maybe what we'll get into later on. I think that it's easy for this society that we live in to discount the point of view and the opinion of young women. I like that she figures it out all on her own.
I will second that. I noticed that very much this time.
Yeah. I'd read a lot of criticism that like Edward is gaslighting her the entire time. And I did not find that to be true. I mean, granted, he tries to hide the fact that he's a vampire, but
that's because of the stakes.
Yeah.
That people tend to, yeah.
And he's so sparkly, which I enjoyed. I thought that was a nice touch. I mean, have your liberty with vampires. You can have your daywalkers from Blade. You can do whatever you want. I was fine with sparkly vampires. So what? They're not real. Or are they? I got a good laugh out of Bella doing her like vampire research on like Alta Vista or whatever it was she's using at the time. And when
Ask Jeeves, what is a vampire?
Yeah. And and I guess this is a credit to the director, is when she's like, she sees clips of what are become imagined like these kind of like animation-y things with like old-timey vampires. I like that the graphic of the woman is always Bella. I thought that was a clever little move of your main character imagining themselves as the main character. I feel like my daughter's doing math homework in the other room. So if anybody can hear a child screaming, it's mathematics that's causing this problem.
I cannot hear it. I know your
Excellent.
daughter, and I'm entirely amused that that's her reaction to doing the math.
Oh, she hates math. But I also hated math, so that's fine. Let's see. I liked I like Edward. Like if you read my reviews of all these movies, you'll find I'm very much Team Edward, and Jacob is a real creep. Like I don't know what the intent. I've never read these books. I will probably never read the books. I like Edward a lot. I think, but I also think Pattinson is a really good actor. I think Kristen Stewart is a fantastic actress. I don't quite understand why both of them got lambasted so much as being bad actors. I liked.
Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Here's what I think. I've not seen many Kristen Stewart movies. I've seen more Robert Pattinson movies, I guess, than I have her films. But in the first film in particular, she makes the same two acting choices over and over and over. And it goes beyond like, this is a character choice. It feels like this is the only thing she thought of to do. And the director did not advise her at any point to do different things. The kind of like, I'm hiding inside my cardigan, like, yeah, okay, I'll give an answer, like, to everything, even including up to like once she's kind of not the new kid or whatever, or when she's talking to her dad, who she should know better. It felt like it was consistently the same, like one or two acting choices in every scene. And it's hard to feel approachable to that character at that point. Because the character is constantly in a defensive stance, as in, please don't talk to me, which is a rough thing to watch for 90 minutes, 2 hours, however long this movie is.
Yeah.
And the character is written to be often completely not paying attention to anybody around her in a very unflattering way to a protagonist. So when you have the combination of, I'm completely always in a defensive stance and I only kind of do the same thing over and over, and then like, I've agreed to go prom dress shopping with you people, but then I'm not paying any attention, I'm going to kind of have a scene and then flee. It creates kind of a weird dynamic, I think, with the audience. I don't know if that was the best choice for all involved. Even if she's going through a thing.
I think that
there's been lots of movies where people go through things.
Yeah. And I had certainly come to this after. I mean, I read like, oh, her acting is always wooden. I'd seen. I will butcher all of these names. She's made a couple of movies with this French director, Oliver Assayas. I don't know.
I am not here to correct you for that.
She's amazing in all of them. So I had kind of come back to this, and she's even incredibly charming and has really good timing in a decent Charlie's Angels remake boot.
The Elizabeth Banks thing.
Yeah. So I I had become a fan of hers before this. So I think those are all fine criticisms. And they're certainly not invalid. I know that living with a 9-year-old this tracks. Like I can see Sydney having like 2 modes, she has 2 modes now. But I think it was a real weird mistake to put brown contacts on Kristen Stewart. I think they're very annoying.
I have no idea what Kristen Stewart looks like in close up, so I did not notice that. I didn't know that was a thing. I assume that was important somehow to the books.
Yeah, I think so. I guess it must be something important in the books.
Yeah. Robert Pattinson, I have not heard as many. I think it's the stuff I've heard has been more about the choices written for the character. And I think there's some stuff that no matter what he would have done as an actor was going to be a bit of a tough row to hoe. He has the, you can almost see him seeing the big cartoon turkey leg when he sees, it's a tough thing that he's not able to really talk to her for like the first third of the movie. And I think after that, you see kind of the Robert Pattinson that I, know and appreciate, in other films.
Yeah. I do like that this is like where we get Robert Pattinson trying to murder people with an automobile. High Life is very good. I think he's trying to murder people with a spaceship, which is like an automobile of the future.
He tries to murder people with the Batmobile as well. I don't want to just like let this train go.
Right. I mean, we've discussed this. Yeah. I mean, the car's good. I was going to try to make a joke about how he's always driving like very like hairy chested cars because he drives like a little tiny Volvo in this thing, which cracks me up. That must have been product placement, I'm sure. Let's see. For those who haven't tuned out, because they saw that we were going to talk about Twilight.
I think people right now are on the edge of their seats here, waiting to hear what you're going to say next. If I had to hazard a guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're
breaking the narrative, man.
Excellent. I really like the ending of this movie. Their little dance scene at prom. Like this movie, listeners may realize like I know that we're normally doing like noir movies, horror movies. I think this is a very sweet movie. I like where they're dancing to Iron and Wine and she's begging him to make her a vampire and he just kisses her on the neck. I think it's a really sweet scene. I think this first film and the last couple of movies have nice tenderness to it that you maybe don't have to put in a movie that might have a guaranteed audience. Like, I don't know. I was trying to read the history of like, okay, the books came out, they were wildly popular. Then they made the movies because why the hell not? Because let's make more money. I assume that's what happens with the Twilight books to movie. I don't know.
My understanding is these are really, really close, much in the way the 50 Shades stuff was, of like, we can't disappoint the fans. We have to include all their favorite beats from the books because they all know them so well. And the books are not something kind of like 50 years old that probably need an updating or something like that. Like they were still, selling like crazy, hot off the press. So
Okay. Good.
so yeah, that's my understanding is, and the books did not, people weren't reading them all ironically. Like, I think if Jamie were reading the books ironically, she would have read one, had a good laugh, and that would have been it. She blazed through all of them. And the questions I had almost to a T were about the logistics of the world of Twilight, like the stuff that normally, if you're doing like, screenplay revisions with your writing circle, are the things that people are going to call out and go, that doesn't really make sense. There's, you can fix that logic problem. Or
did you have problems like that in this movie?
Well, that was almost exclusively my problems with this movie. Yeah. Like a lot of it just didn't make any sense if for what it was. And I don't want to get into that quite yet, unless that's your jam. But that was, by and large, it starts early and it never really lets up as far as like, wait, why is that happening?
Well, let me ask you this. This is kind of what, like, watching this, I wonder if the criticisms aimed at this movie in this series cannot be overlaid onto everything popular. I mean,
I'll put it this way. The movie opens with the fact that her 40-year-old mother is taking off with a minor league ball player, which means one of two things. Either Stephenie Meyer doesn't know that most minor league ball players are like 18, or, your baseball career, even if you're the best, is over by the time you're like 32. And it's that kind of stuff that it's like, well, she didn't Google that. And the logistics of what does it mean to be a person who why would you keep going to high school if you're going to live forever? Like, I can see doing it once in a while, but
because you're 17.
I was 17. I could not wait to get out of high school.
But he's 17 forever.
And that's really one of the big things they don't really get into. He's 17 forever, which sounds like damnation in many ways.
Absolutely.
But he's also 117.
17-year-olds are idiots.
I there's no disagreement there.
Do you?
Is he 17 or is he 117?
I think he is 18.
So these are the kind of things that as I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't really know. Like,
wait. You do know you're watching Twilight, right? I mean, and that's kind of where
these are the things that I'd be like, as a writer, I would expect Stephenie Meyer to put some thought into some of this, and if not, then in the translation to film, where it's going to hit a much broader audience, to say we should probably explain that a little bit more.
I would say, who the fuck cares?
Well,
because it's Twilight. I mean, I think you can apply this to everything. I think you write to the audience that you're after, and if you hit it, then you hit it, and not a whole lot matters. I mean, I think you can apply this to, I think you can pick apart absolutely everything. And I think we pick apart, and what I'm really curious about, where I think this podcast episode could go, but I know we're probably wearing down the patience and the goodwill.
People are right now sitting on the edges of their chairs waiting.
Are they?
Yes.
So when I watch Twilight, I think of two franchises. I think of Marvel, and I think of James Bond. And I think both of these exist purely on the good graces of the audience, because the audiences care. I mean, I love James Bond. I will see James Bond movies until I die. I mean, that could be the last thing I ever see is Roger Moore in a little fake mustache and a little hat driving that little like airplane in Octopussy, and I will die happy. But in many respects, James Bond is pretty dumb. But I love it. I know, right? But I love it.
We have so much to unpack.
No, I absolutely love James Bond because I'm willing to jump in and accept it. And I think it's interesting when people are willing to accept their stupidity, but not accept somebody else's stupidity. And I think Twilight is a brand of stupidity. And why not let those people enjoy their stupidity?
I'm not trying to stop anyone from enjoying their stupidity. I'm saying, as I was a bottle in watching this movie, going, wait, why is this way? Why is that way? And I will say, for the people I was watching it with, they had not had those questions when they'd read the books and previously watched the movie. So they were in, yeah. And that's not a criticism of anybody. Yeah. This is, as I'm watching the movie, I have logistical questions about what it means to live forever. And this movie did not care about those questions. And that threw me way the hell off. But I do think it is a vital question to the Twilight franchise of, and part of it too is we've all seen movies like Near Dark that actually have a guy who's trapped in the body of a 12-year-old forever, and the absolute hell he feels that he's trapped in with this. Mm-hmm. And you've seen that, played out in a few other films. That we don't ever really get the answer. We get the idea that she gets to have her cake and eat it too, of like, oh, older guys find me interesting, but he's still 17, so it's still okay. Wink.
But he's 17. For the audience, he's 17. And he's nice. He's got that like...
He's an older gentleman. Of course he's nice.
He's not an older gentleman.
He's 117.
No, he's not. He's 17. He's 17. Because that's what he is to Bella.
Yeah,
and I don't...
To the audience. As far as Stephanie Meyer is concerned, yes.
And I think that character is maybe supposed to be 19. I know I said 18 earlier, but I rescind and I apologize. I never meant he was 18. I think he's 19. I think for this movie and for this audience, he is a little older than she is. He's a little wiser than he is. He's a little bit of a bad boy. Mm-hmm. But he's got like good intentions. He doesn't turn her into a vampire. He gives her a very sweet kiss on the neck. And I think it's fantastic for what this movie wants to do and what it needs to do.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that.
and that's why I think this is a good movie. That's why I think this is a good movie.
It's a fairy tale.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's let it exist.
It's existing very successfully, no matter what I think about it.
I tried so hard to go online and find Twilight shit to drink out of or wear. I almost in Sharpie wrote like Team Edward on my t-shirt or chest or whatever I needed to do. But mathematics homeworks as you
I'm much more aware in 2022 than I was in 2009 or 2010 of I'm at the time a young man watching something intended for a completely different audience, and thus I'm going to just treat it with mockery, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm watching it much more through the lens of, I get it. It's for 13 to 15-year-olds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It does not remove every question I had as it would.
Yeah.
And there's still some things that I'm like, wait, but why is the vampire a doctor? Like, I wanted to know, like, this is how we get prequels now.
But
I want to know how he became a doctor.
I think they kind of address it in the movie, which I'm ashamed that I've paid so much attention. But I think he wants to help people, and I also think he uses his vampire power to
help people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What pardon me. We got to be pushing an hour.
Yeah.
We're pretty close. The other thing that really struck me this time around, we can talk about it for as long or as short as we want.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's interesting that I'm really curious as to why this movie got so much like mockery and hatred and stuff like that. Hatred is a bit of a strong word,
mm-hmm.
but I feel like
I think people, it was something that was so big, just gigantic, that and it was about something that I don't think it was the fact that it was about a vampire or that it was about teens, because we just gotten through freaking Harry Potter as all of this is happening. I think it had more to do with I think honestly some of the logistical stuff was stuff people like came to it and had questions about, and the movie did not come close to doing the bare minimum of most movies that are vampire movies and whatnot spend the bare minimum of time explaining themselves. This movie felt like they had either not thought about it, or they were just going to be ornery about not explaining it. I think the idea of a vampire who sparkled was so novel, and it was in the long history of vampires. I think now ain't nobody give a crap. I mean, we're on the far end of, I think today, as we record this, I think today was the release of the TV series of Vampire Academy, which is about a high school for vampires to be better vampires. Like, at this point, the horses are out of the barn. Edward won. Like, the whole idea of like teen vampires and all this, there's whole book sections at Barnes and Noble for books like this. The people who wanted to be snarky about it lost whatever battle they thought they were having.
Thank God.
And I think there's good and there's bad about it. I would like to be able to get through a conversation about vampires and not, which happens to me weekly. But I've
apologized so many times for that, and I refuse to apologize anymore.
But it's one of those things of, well, it's not the vampires I grew up with, and I think that's kind of where it was for a lot of people. Of I want my near dark vampires, I want Lestat, but which is also, by the way, getting another TV series, and I think you can draw lines there. I think that there's parts of it that I look at that I'm like, well, this is clearly just X-Men and I should enjoy it as such. And it is. It's a bunch of people with superpowers who are hated and feared by the world they're trying to protect, going to school and playing baseball. It's X-Men.
Hey, did the X-Men play baseball?
A little bit here and there.
I didn't realize. I take it all back. Well, let's see. I absolutely adore the baseball scene because one, I love baseball. And two, I thought that was a very clever, fun scene of vampires getting to like shrug off what normal people could do. And I like that they have their own uniforms.
Yes, and I like that they were period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do wonder why. Here's a topic for another podcast, but I do wonder why movies and literature aimed at young ladies get more scrutiny than everything else.
You know, having been someone who grew up in a pre-2000 era when comics were considered to be for perverts and you know, people with mental issues. Like literally, I'm not saying that lightly. Like that is literally true. And as someone who's at least a pervert, but
cheers, brother.
But I don't think that it's, you know, science fiction when we were coming up was considered to be for people who were, you know, mostly had something wrong with them, unless it was for some culturally stamped approved thing. Star Trek, which is bigger than anything. Star Wars was kind of this very special thing in that everyone kind of liked it, and that was unusual. I feel because it wasn't sciencey, people were kind of like, yeah, it's not for nerds, you know. But the science fiction certainly was. If you read comics past the age of 14, it was something to like not tell people about. I mean, I remember in college, a guy who went to Funny Papers in Dobie Mall, who was there all the time, had told his girlfriend that Funny Papers was a head shop. So if she called Funny Papers, he, you know, to find him, because this is all pre-cell phone, like that he was doing something cool. He didn't tell the girl he was like sleeping with that he read comics. I mean, that's kind of where we were pre-X-Men movie. I mean, I know it's hard to remember, and the kids today wouldn't even believe it, but I mean, it was a different world. And Austin, I think, was like more accepting of all that stuff, being a college town.
Sure.
I can tell you when I was in Houston, I did not go around telling a whole bunch of people how much I loved me some Spider-Man. Was not the first thing I told people. So anyway, I think that women take it, as much as I can understand that, I think young women take it on the chin much more. And a lot of the fiction that was for young women, like, you know, particularly very young women, like Sweet Valley High and stuff, was really concrete, and it was really based around non-fantastical things. It was crazy things like babysitting clubs and stuff like that. And I don't know if there was a lot of this kind of stuff before Stephanie Meyer found that market, and now that's all you can get at the bookstore. So Stephanie Meyer was right, and I hope she's enjoying her Uncle Scrooge vault of money.
Yeah, I hope so too, and I'm sure she is. I just always find it interesting what we as a society latch onto as what is accepted to like mock and what is not. And I was clearly I mean, early on, I was on board with like Twilight is got to be dumb, right? Like everybody's saying it's got to be dumb. But then I watched it, I was like, oh, I don't think this is dumb. I think it's fine. I think it's no stupider than my James Bond movies or the Marvel movies I like, or any of these like properties that people latch onto and relate to and want to ride along with. So
Yeah.
I think if you're going to laugh at Twilight for no good reason, then take a long walk on a short pier.
Well, I think I don't want to wrap it up there, because I think that there were some things, and this is the stuff that we got into a lot of with the 50 Shades podcast, which, I mean, I think people throw around the term gaslighting and misuse it. Full stop. So I don't know exactly what complaints or criticisms people had, but it is also a story by and for young women that is about a guy saying, I love you so much, but I will kill you if I get close to you, which is the red flaggiest of abusive behavior. It's hard to ignore in the moment when you're watching this.
I think
I get it. It's not doing that or saying that, but it is romanticizing a behavior.
Is it? Or is it just something that people can point to say why it's dumb? I mean, can you not say that Peter Parker is a piece of shit because he lies to an old lady all the time?
Yeah, you can.
Absolutely, you can.
Yeah.
But we're not saying that at all.
Yeah, I think that they got rid of it in the movies for a reason.
I don't know if they did.
They did. He did. Aunt May knows.
She found out.
Yeah. Jamie's downstairs right now watching a whole movie about Peter Parker messing up a spell because he wanted to make sure Aunt May knew. I'm not defending the incredibly silly world of this versus that. I'm just saying,
well,
Marvel made a choice. They recognized it was a problem. But they also got rid of the idea of secret identities for almost everybody else. They had to make a reason Spider-Man had one and wore a mask. But the Stephanie Meyer, by hook or crook, accidentally wrote Edward as demonstrating a lot of behaviors you don't want your kid thinking are A-okay. Like your boyfriend sneaking into your window and watching you sleep. Your boyfriend is talking about how his feelings are so great that he both loves you and may murder you. Like, and those
I think that's taken to. I know what he's saying in the movie, but I'm going to credit the readers and the intended audience of this movie to know that that's not literal.
You don't think he was literally thinking he might have to eat her?
Of course he is, but it's also
a fairy tale,
not a documentary.
Yeah, but this is also how you apply film criticism to a movie, to say, okay, what is it trying to say?
I think you have to give the intended audience respect enough to think that they can figure it out. And I think they did. I don't think that the audience of this movie is going to be cool with dating a psycho. I think it is the idea that you are so special that somebody cannot, that they may not be able to control themselves around you, but they love you enough to do it.
Justin, the problem is that's classic abusive behavior. They can't you see, you just drive me crazy because I love you so much.
But he never does
You're
any.
the one. I agree. I know what you're saying, but I can hold both ideas in my mind. I don't think Stephanie Meyer thought she was trying to sneak one over on anybody.
I think we're giving too much criticism to things like Twilight, and perhaps not enough criticism, or at least the same criticism, to let's resolve our problems by punching the bad guy till he's dead or in outer space. Which is,
Justin, that is a legitimate solution to a problem.
I know that.
But to your point, I watch Marvel movies, right? And among the people I hang out with outside of the podcast, none of them do, for that exact reason.
I don't,
I don't think they're weird for it. I don't argue with them about it. I'm like, yeah, I kind of wish they'd find a more creative solution to wrapping these movies up. Like, it'd be nice to not have violence be the solution to everything. Absolutely. I don't disagree with that criticism. But if you want to know why people kind of were treating Twilight as a punching bag, I am reporting to you what was going on.
Why aren't they doing that with Marvel movies?
They do.
James Bond movies.
They do all the time. We ignore it because it's our stuff.
Okay.
The same way the Twilight fans ignored it and built an entire empire of Twilight stuff.
Fuck yeah.
I sent you the picture of the Twilight flip-flops the other day, right?
They should have been here today.
I mean, I think it's an interesting question for all the media criticism and for what people, clearly, to say that, suddenly we're going to start having action movies that mostly don't end with violence is not what we have done with cinema traditionally over the past 120 years. Right. I mean, the first movies were people pretty much punching each other and fornicating.
Let's hope.
And I think the audience was savvy enough and understood enough. But I had the same reactions when people were throwing criticism at my Westerns when I was in college, and I was like, oh, how dare they? Then you go, okay, well, I at least understand why the person would have seen the movie that way, or it's a legit stance or way to view a movie that is not the way I viewed the movie. And I in watching the movie, it was one of the things that when I was watching it the first time and pausing it, I was like, he keeps saying he's going to murder her. That's weird. That's weird.
He's a vampire.
I know.
But he's a vampire. I think if you can't accept a movie on its terms,
yeah,
and what it's trying to say, then fuck yourself. Don't bring your shit to the movie.
That's impossible, though.
Don't watch movies. If you can't separate you from the movie's not about you. It is the movie. But the thing isn't you. It is the thing. I know you're going to bring your hang-ups, but that's your fucking fault.
I think that is one of the things that as you start looking at different ways of criticizing or viewing movies, a position that I will be candid, I don't think enough people take.
People are dumb.
Frequently. Often. I'm on Twitter. But
oh my God, yes.
and
And I'm dumb too. Like, I'm dumb. Like, I'll come to it from my point of view, and it's just as fucking stupid as anybody else's point of view. I was reading today, Ryan,
yes, sir.
that people should not vote because voting is deep state propaganda. That is the dumbest shit I've ever read.
That may be the dumbest thing I've ever heard was somebody wrote down.
Yeah. Just like,
I'm kind of delighted by how completely like up someone's own ass they were with.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the people who are saying this, like, please don't vote. But I let's see. We're pushing it. I'm pushing it here. I'm pushing the goodwill of all the listeners.
I don't think so. I think
Yes.
it's important for people to hear a contrary or a viewpoint that's not in lockstep. And that's why this podcast exists.
Yeah. When you experience art, step into it. Leave yourself at the door. Leave your hang-ups there.
Mm-hmm.
Just step into it. If it works for you, hell yes. If it doesn't, there's another thing. But don't shit on that thing because it didn't jive with you. Celebrate what you love. Don't shit on what you hate.
So your message is one of love and not shitting elsewhere.
Yes. Yeah. Love what you love. Don't shit elsewhere.
I mean, I think that's fair enough. And that's why I wanted to do this episode.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I like the first movie. I like the last two movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to evangelize this series. And if anybody says, well, but, I'll be like, okay.
I think a lot of people would do well to follow your lead. I mean, I'll be honest. So we recorded our Thor Love and Thunder podcast the other day.
Mm-hmm. I had to
And
turn it off because I really want to watch it. And I felt like I was going to get spoiled by it.
you would have. We talk about the end and whatnot. But it was kind of fascinating to me because I'd heard nothing but negative things about this movie for months at this point. And I watched it and I was like, you're all crazy. I've seen all of your complaints, and I could movie jujitsu you on like 99% of them, and because you're wrong. I'm sorry, audience. But at the end of the day, I am kind of like, why are you spending your time trying to prove the perfectly cromulent Thor Love and Thunder is a problem because you didn't agree with how they did a CGI choice. And so now we have to say this movie is the worst thing that's ever, Kevin Feige must be on his way out.
Those people.
And yeah, and that's kind of where we've kind of gotten to. I don't ever want the podcast to be that. But it, I think, we spend a lot, we don't always agree. I mean, I don't know if I'm totally sold that Twilight is my favorite movie at the end of this conversation, but
it ain't mine.
That's because it's Twilight 2.
It's Twilight 4, part 1. It might be The Thin Man.
Really? Because you gave it 4.5 stars, not 5. Don't think I didn't notice.
God damn it.
Um,
That could
I
be
was
the
like, what the hell? Where's the other half a star when I saw that review?
That could be our
That'll be our Christmas movie.
yeah, we're gonna get BB guns and we're gonna like go like this with our legs. For those who have not seen The Thin Man,
We're gonna do Justin and Ryan Day Drink the Thin Man for our Christmas movie.
shame on you.
Yeah, get to it now is what I'll say.
We're gonna get little mustaches.
Speak for yourself. I'm gonna get a little dog outfit.
Oh, Asta.
I think it's a fine place to stop. Is on a completely different film.
Why not?
Decades prior.
Yeah.
But anyway, go out there, watch the Twilight. I know this. We wanted. The interesting thing is how well this fits in with the theme of this Halloween, which has kind of been like,
oh no.
Well, it's been like we're not doing Dracula, but we're gonna do like cat people, and we're doing like I almost said Bauhaus. We're doing The Hunger.
Holy moly!
So this fits in Hunger very well with the theme. So
The Hunger. Every now and then, I will like try to distort my voice and talk to Tanya and say, "No ice." For those who have seen The Hunger, that's like the first lines of the film. Is David Bowie saying, "No ice"?
Does she know what you're talking about? Because that's the thing is I never quote movies at my house. Jamie just looks at me.
That movie might play once a month.
Oh, okay.
Really loudly when people are trying to sleep.
We did cat people. We did something called Old Vampire, which I'm going to recommend to you. It's also known as Vampirella or something like that. Vampira. It's David Niven as an old vampire.
David Niven as Vampirella would be really interesting.
What else did we do? We've done so many because we started so long ago, and Simon keeps calling me and saying like, I've got another movie, and I'm like, sure, whatever. I'm just going to cram them all between mid-September and Halloween. So we'll just keep going. Anyway, thank you so much for the interesting and enlightening conversation. And Justin can be found lurking around YA sections of bookstores all over this country.
My crouch is really good, so I look like a child at first. But then when the adults show up, clearly a joke.
Yes. But I've enjoyed talking about it. Thank you so much, man. You have a happy Halloween.
You too. Everybody have a good Halloween. Check your Snickers bars for razor blades.
Someone else can come and save me from myself. I can't be who you are. I can't be who you are.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.